Reflecting on what's been said here today, I don't think there's a member of the State Assembly that does not want to have a better New York. I think we just have a little bit different ideas on how we get there. And I think that's where the respect has to come from, is that the members of the Assembly Minority Conference are very passionate and very outspoken about their values and beliefs and principles as well. And certainly, as we've experienced here in Albany, in this chamber, there are successes to be proud of. That is correct. But there are also things that we have much work to do. We still have the highest property taxes on average in the entire country. We still have the highest state and local tax burden in the country. We have the largest out-migration of residents in the country. These are statistics that have to change. If we want to lower property taxes, instead of gimmicks, I suggest that New York State take over all of those mandates that New York State government puts on local governments and school districts. I think we need to reform Medicaid. We need to make sure that we still do not lead in spending the most amount of money on Medicaid programs in the entire country. With California having a population of 33 million, we have 19 million plus, we spend more money than California. In fact, we spend more money than Texas and Florida population combined. When we have New York State mandates dealing with teacher evaluations and Common Core standards, but we don't offer any help in how to pay for the implementation. When we're demanding school districts across the state, the low, wealthy, or the poorest among us in those school districts, the demands on them financially are horrendous. And we don't just have a tale of two cities in this state. We have a tale of different parts of this state. We see cranes going up in New York City, but we don't see cranes going up in Rochester, New York. We may see cranes going up in Buffalo, but we don't see cranes going up in Utica. When we see the Southern Tier, who is saying, we believe that we can safely introduce hydrofracking in our community, we want it, yet we have no action. When we have had messages of necessity to usurp a process of public knowledge and public hearings on very emotional topics, we cannot return to those days of using a message to minimize the public debate as we did with the SAFE Act, where we're making law-abiding gun owners, in effect, prisoners in their own state. Now, we realize we don't all agree on these issues. We get that. And we all can count. We get that as well. But we do have a responsibility in the minority to make sure that we are speaking out on the behalf of millions of residents that disagree with some of the, quote, progressive agenda. And we need to have those debates. We need to have those discussions in committee and on this floor. And certainly, and I respect Harvey Wiesenberg, but it was the Assembly minority that put a budget amendment on the budget last year because the two majorities and the governor agreed to cut funding to the developmentally disabled community. And it was the Assembly Republican Conference that put forth a budget to restore it that was rejected by this chamber. Good for us that it got that it was restored, but it should have never happened in the first place. We have moved forward now in the time that I've been here, especially the last 3, 4, 5 years, where we have offered budget amendments dealing with a variety of these topics. What I'd like to see is let's have a really true, fair, and up and down vote on the substance of these amendments. Many of the things that the governor talked about in terms of tax relief looking forward to 2014 were introduced by the Assembly Republican Conference right here and defeated right here. So we're going to continue to have these debates, and we're going to have disagreements, and we always encourage a respectful debate, but respectful debate means respectful listening as well. And again, I understand, I think we all understand that we're not going to agree on everything around here, and we're not going to agree with everything the governor does, and we're not going to agree with everything that the Senate does, but what we owe it to each other is at least to listen on the merits of the debate. And certainly, beyond the things that we're going to talk about in the budget and the things we're going to deal with public policy, and even on campaign finance reform. We want to talk reform? Fine. Let's reform the entire campaign system, but why do we have to use taxpayer dollars to pay for it? When we talk about reform, we had measures stopped in this House last year dealing with reform as it pertains to public officers and their behavior. Let's take up some meaningful legislation that's already introduced to send a message to restore confidence to the people that we represent, that we will perform to the highest ethical standards in this House and in state government. So there are a lot of things we need to work on. And our conference has always been willing to work with the other side on all of these issues. And we will continue to offer ideas. And by the way, the first thing we don't say is, we're going to give you a different idea because you're a Democrat, we're Republicans. Absolutely not. One of the things that we've really strived for on this floor, especially the last several years, is offering different public policy initiatives and ideas and not talk about partisan politics. And that's one of the things that I've really tried to lead our conference in, especially when they have the media that would prefer us to be bashing each other over the head or kneecapping each other here like they do in Washington. Well, I don't think that's good public policy, what they do in Washington. I'd rather have a fierce public policy debate here with the public through the media, and then let's have at it. And so I couldn't be more honored to serve in the state legislature, but we've got to do better. And we've got to do better with the reputation of what they think of legislators in Albany. And that we've got to take concrete action. And we'd be willing to work with you on ethics reform, on every single topic. All we ask is one thing. Let's listen. Just listen to what we have to say. In committee, on this floor, separate meetings. You know, I want to commend members on both sides of the aisle this past year in the Assembly. There were several members from New York City that came up to upstate New York, and there's some folks from upstate New York that went down to New York City. And the feedback received from both sides was, why can't we do more of this so we can understand each person's problems better? Because I get it, if you're from Queens, you not so much get it what's happening in Batavia. We get that point. But that's why we need to have more conversation, especially when we're talking about public policy. And for the guys that came up from New York City, up to Phil Palmisano's district, they got to visit their first farm. They thought, we thought all farms were corporations. No, they're families. But that's how you get better insight and how you eventually craft better public policy, is to enlist each other and try to share each other's walk a mile in my shoes. It makes a huge difference. So hopefully with 2014, no more messages of necessity, unless, God forbid, we really have a state emergency. Let's have more open dialogue. Let's try to meet halfway on some of these programs. And I get the vote count. It's a democracy. I get it. But I guarantee you we can make much better public policy and much better legislation if we're working together on it, rather than you folks on the other side just saying what's going to be our way. We've got a lot of bright people in this room. I respect you all. And I'm looking forward to a vivacious 2014. And I would also like to thank, well, first of all, welcome the new 3 members. But I would also like to thank the Assembly Republican Conference for allowing me to continue to serve you as your leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.